Right, 65K in certain categories. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, at some point, let us go, we got a problem, Houston, and we need to fix it. And it doesn't matter if there's a D, an R, or whatever else, or you're just done with politics. Recording? All right. Well, I'm sitting here with Mike Ward and Jesse Westover with the Westover Law Firm, as usual. And we're doing our first three-way, so let's get casting. And Mike calls me last week, and he's got a friend, I believe, that's inquiring as to what to do. And, okay, we get these questions. You guys get these questions as lawyers all the time. Hey, what do I do? You know, your neighbor's battling it out with the HOA or you know, whatever. Or I got this speeding ticket. Stop me if you've not heard this before.
I've had some phone calls, yeah, for sure.
And you probably have had a few yourself.
Constant. You get a call for, if it smells legal, we get the call.
Right. If my neighbor did, okay, they keep parking that third car on the street. Anyway, so you guys get these calls all the time. Mike gets this call last week and smartly says, hey, let me text. I think it was a text. Let me text, and it was probably just a forward text, if I had to guess. Dana, who may have handled this once upon a time, way a long time ago, which just so happens, me and Mr. Westover over there at the Westover Law Firm have handled this particular case too many times to matter. But what I liked was Mike's response, because Mike doesn't do criminal defense, if you can avoid it, only when you're defending yourself, though, from time to time, with a boat matter over there on a lake.
I'm going to take the fifth on that.
Smart man.
And Jesse is immigration professional, period. So, okay. What's your friend's question? Let's just open it up.
All right. So, first of all, I just want to say I'm really glad to have the immigration guy and the criminal guy here to be able to help make sense of this for me, and I hope you can.
We'll see.
I just manage a bunch of lawyers at this point. I have represented this case some years ago, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's fun to be here just to hear the story. Let's get it.
So the facts for this one are: this is a friend of a friend of a friend, and he has an immigrant has come across the border from Mexico, and this person picked up the immigrant and moved him from one place in the state of Arizona.
Is the immigrant legal, or is it an illegal immigrant?
Illegal.
Oh, okay, so it's a crosser.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's my understanding that we have hundreds of thousands, millions of crossers now, and so isn't that okay now? Is it really legal? Or?
You want me to address that one real quick?
Go ahead.
So yeah, so just so you're understanding the facts. So we're gonna have a little bit of a difference of what Dana was mentioning, whether we've got somebody that was paroled into the United States or allowed into the United States, which is happening quite often right now. So if you're presenting yourself for inspection, meaning whether you have legal documents to cross or not, visa, passport, whatever, if you present yourself for a credible fear interview or for at least inspection, they can parole you into the United States or let you into the United States. You're still illegal, but you've been allowed entry into the United States. And so I'm assuming if that person had been paroled and then they were picked up, it wouldn't have been a big deal because they actually encourage the family to come and get them or encourage people to come and get them and move them to wherever they need to be for their next court hearing. So this guy was probably somebody who did not present himself for inspection, assuming the story's going to something where there's a criminal matter involved.
That's where we're headed.
Okay.
So he moved this individual. I don't know where the details. I'm assuming from somewhere close to the border to Chandler or something like that. And he was picked up and has been charged with a federal crime, and is looking at 12 to 18 months in a federal pen is the plea deal that is being offered for him, and he's trying to figure out whether or not that's a good deal. So I reached out to Dana and said, hey, what can you tell me? What can I advise this guy?
The last one we did has been 4 or 5 years ago as far as this particular fact pattern. I think I could be wrong. Could be 3.
I think I say and you may not have been dealing with it, but there was one recent too. This
okay.
guy was a green card holder though, so it's a little bit different
Yeah.
as far as the consequences go. But yeah, I had another
No,
guy.
I think Brian's handling that
There.
one, and we're.
It's an older.
working
The
through
guy's
that
like
one.
75 years
Yeah.
old or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Picked up his niece.
I think we're going to be good to go because of the familiar.
I think there's some family elements to it. Yeah.
All right. So the last one that matches this really well was Beto. I can't say his real name because I'm just going to go with Beto because that's kind of close enough for government work, but his name is very, very unique. So somebody can kind of find out what happened to Beto. Let everybody out there know Beto's doing good right now, but not for lack of sweat, blood, and all sorts of holy hera. First thing your friend needed to have done was hire an attorney now. The problem is to find someone that knows what they're doing criminally is very, 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 very remote. I'm not ripping on the criminal defense guys out there at all. I like to rip on them from time to time because there's plenty to rip on. But the reality is this is a very narrow scope of knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, because you're mixing a little bit of federal and state law on this. Well, you're mixing a lot of it.
Yeah, you got crossover all over the place, and not everybody's got you on speed dial.
And there's an immigration element to it, obviously. Yeah.
And so here we are, and so I like the fact that let's just rewind for a minute and let me ask you a question, Mike. You got a guy outside your neighborhood. He's got a good tan, and he speaks Spanish. Okay, all right. And his car's broke down. Or his bicycle, or whatever his mode of transportation, his cart and horse. And they break down. And you say, oh man.
And it's Christmas time.
And cold.
Right.
And raining.
Yeah. Maybe he's got his family with him.
Maybe.
Yeah. I'm with you.
All right.
I'm with you.
Let's add that. Okay, whatever. You get my point.
Yeah.
His rigs broke down. And you stop and say, hey, and you, having lived in Bolivia, speak a little bit of Spanish, and you talk to this fella and say, are you okay? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And would you be surprised if he said, hey, I'm not, this is broke down, and you say, well, jump in and I'll take you home and or to the auto repair shop or whatever, right? Okay, and so he jumps in and away you go, and then let's say you get pulled over 2 miles down the road, okay? What now?
Well, one thing that I'm certain of is that I haven't done anything wrong, because this is a good thing. I mean, based on the belief system that I have, and it's like, I mean, you call this a good Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
It's someone who sees a need, steps up and says, hey, that person needs some help right now. I'm going to help that person.
Kind of like somebody that needs water on the side of the road that's just looking like they could use a bottle of water.
So I feel really, really good that not only have I not done anything bad, wrong, illegal, unlawful, I have done something good. Exactly what I'm supposed to do. My mom would be proud of me today.
All right, that's good. All right. Well, your mom already is proud of you.
Okay. She's going to be even more so.
Okay. Well, now let's change the dial now. Let's say you get a text in the middle of the night from your buddy at, I don't know, let's say your buddy, your neighbor down the road. Says, hey, I got 3 guys over there in Tucson on this road and this road is where they're going to be, or this address is where they're going to be. And they need a lift. They need a ride. For $1,500, could you go give them a ride?
I'm a
Back to here?
Yeah.
No, this is somebody you know.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem sketch. It doesn't seem any. It's just kind of an out of the ordinary. Hey, they're willing to pay $1,500. You go grab them up.
I think they're because I've been lawyering for 30 years.
Okay, check the lawyer.
It kind of just piques my, wait a minute.
The flag went up there?
Yeah, you're paying me too much. Frankly, it's kind of like, hey, we can cover your gas money and give you a few bucks. You know, if it's a little more, if it's a lot lower than that, I'm probably feeling more at ease in doing it. But the $1,500 bucks.
So friend says, I would do it, but I can't because of, and a very compelling because of.
Yeah.
I can't because I got to go see my mom in the hospital, or I can't because my wife's spitting out my fourth kid, or I can't because, yeah, I just said spitting out my fourth kid, I know. It's awesome. Anyway, I can't. Can you please help me out? Now, does that change the dial?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. These guys are willing to pay. They're stuck there. They just need to get here to this address. I'll send you the addresses. All right. Well, what you said to me last week when you told me about this individual that got arrested and then now is facing 12 to 18 months, and we'll go over what that means in a minute because it's kind of mixing into federal over there for not too far off of what you deal with.
Right.
What we call that is an Uber or a taxi.
Right.
What happens if one of these non-declaring, non-paroled individuals, so we don't really know what the percentage is of those that elect that route to parole into the United States and then have a court date that they're never going to appear to. That probably is very true. And some of them might appear to it, but very few in my experience. And what we've
I have
seen.
no idea.
But hard to even put a finger on that. It goes back to the hole in the pants. We talk about holes in pants. It's all the rage. Have you not seen the pants these kids are wearing nowadays? There's like holes. They come with holes in them.
Yeah.
Well, our immigration system has a hole in its pants. We call it a bucket now. We've gone to the bucket since that's less trendy.
Okay.
We're vibing. So what happens here is that's trafficking. So you cruise over there because your friend's wife is about to give birth to, and that's what ultimately kind of swayed you. All right, I'll do you a favor. And your kids, you get popped because you just picked up 3 folks or 4 folks or 1, doesn't matter how many really, that did not parole in, and they crossed the border illegally, and you just picked them up, and now you're trafficking. And that's what this individual is facing in federal court. 12 to 18 months of his life is now going to be in federal prison. Likely, if he has no criminal background, it's going to be that 12-month marker around it. But the federal system now is where we get popping a little bit. Federal system's interesting because it's like the points system.
I've got a question for you here. So I'm thinking of terms from law school because we don't have to think about mens rea after we leave law school.
For everybody out there, mens rea is intent. It's your state of mind.
Okay. So my state of mind is to go and help my friend.
Right.
But that includes picking up people and moving them.
Right.
So if I go and confess exactly, and the prosecutor understands exactly my intent, what I was going to do, am I still guilty of the crime of trafficking?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
I know, right?
What is the mens rea on that one?
What's that?
I know what it is on the immigration side, but what's on the federal crime side?
Okay, so the federal crime
Is
side
it
is
just knowingly, or is it?
It's knowingly, right?
Okay.
And so you go and confess knowingly, but the reality is the way that they treat this is this. Okay, you could fight this and go to trial on your mens rea defense, and your mens rea defense, meaning I didn't have the intent to traffic an illegal thing, I hate to say thing, person, or anything else, right? But if you go to trial on trafficking charges and lose because they ain't buying that, because when your buddy called you, they're just thinking that's a little bit fishy.
The money and whatever else.
Money and all that jazz comes into play. That's why I added the money in there. I was pretty forceful on keeping that there. That's what they hang their hat on. So Beto, exactly the same case. Beto's working a job, and Beto is he's a brand newly minted U.S. citizen because he married through, you guys got him his sheepskin. He's a citizen through his wife, and he had just had his first child. These cases that are worked come with a pretty sad story most of the time, or at least a pretty human element. Very, ooh. So, okay. Beto comes in with his cute wife that just gave birth to his first of two children. They have two now. And a little boy. Hair that looked like Elvis. I mean, as cute as anyway, very, just, all right. So he's working on a construction site, and he's what does he do? It's not, well, he swings hammer. He's a
framer, carpenter?
A framer.
Okay.
Thank you. Holy senior moment. He's a framer. And he's trying to become a journeyman framer. He's trying to grow in the ranks. And he's been doing this for quite a few years. He looked really good, I'm assuming, because he got citizenship fairly through the process with Westover's office. But he was brand new citizen. And so somebody on the job site, because he's still a young kid. I mean, he's still 24, 25 years old. And they're like, hey, make a little extra money going and picking up a few folks over for me in Tucson. Exactly what I just told you happened with your friend calling you. His friends over there, hey, make a little bit of extra scratch going and picking up. I think it was 3 folks. In Tucson, I do it myself, but I can't. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. But there's a little bit of money in it for you. Get a little bit of weekend type money. All right. So he's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. I could really use the money. We just had a baby, blah, 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 blah. Now he's popped with trafficking. Now, Mike's issue last week, and I don't want to really speak for you, Mike, because I'd like to hear your voice. Mike's issue, and then we're going to get into the government issue overall, the overarching issue. But Mike's issue was, why in the Sam hell would that be a criminal offense when Uber goes and picks up with impunity, a taxi cab goes and picks up with impunity? You could hitchhike and pick them up, and that's not impunity all of a sudden. But you can get on a bus. They don't check nothing.
By the way, it's my understanding the guy being trafficked was released and free.
Sure.
No charges there whatsoever.
Yeah, that he did have fun with that part of it too.
So.
Yeah, and so now we have this young fella that's staring on the barrel at prison time, federal prison time, for doing this. Now, if somebody were to offer my 18-year-old right now, because he's really, 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 really gung-ho about employment and really gung-ho about earning money and really, 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 really awesome about sticking to things and earning money. If somebody were to offer him $10.50, maybe $8, he's on.
He'd give someone a ride.
Yeah, he's on. With my car.
Right.
Gone goes him, this lackluster employee kid of mine. I hope he watches this. Anyway, you throw a grand in front of him. Oh, man, he's all over it. He's not thinking, oh, hey, this might be an undocumented, this might be dangerous, what's in their backpacks. He's not thinking of any of those things. He's thinking, oh, look at what just fell in my lap. My buddy's dad that I played football with, my buddy's dad is saying, hey, there's money in it for you. Yeah, it's federal crime, trafficking, and prove otherwise. And that's the bottom line. Prove otherwise. So the first thing they do is, I don't know if you're getting this on the video page, but they check this thing right here. You want to pull it into the frame? That's the first thing they do. They look at their text. Oh, you made $2,500, Beto. That's exactly what Beto had made for that particular run, and it shook the very fiber of his life. Okay, so now, Westover's turn. We've got the hole in the bucket we've been talking about. And we have the issue that Mike brings up. They're pouring over the border, whether they're getting paroled or they're just crossing. No way of knowing, but we know that there's both.
Right.
We know that there's a whole bunch of both. Okay? And once they get into our state, whether it be Texas, California, Arizona, our border states, once they get here, why is it illegal for any person to transport them anywhere?
Yeah, and the way the statute's written on the immigration side, and it's similar on the federal side. When I say that, so obviously you've got federal crimes, and those can relate to immigration. Now, immigration doesn't criminally prosecute people, but there are civil violations that basically make you inadmissible, meaning you can't come to the United States or you can't get an immigration benefit, or they make you deportable. If you already have some kind of immigration benefit, they can take it away. So those are the two things that we deal with. They're not going to throw you in prison and sentence you. They might throw you in detention,
right,
and until you get a bond.
Which is jail, by the way,
it can
which is hell.
Factor in the same way. Yeah,
Yep.
It's still behind bars type of issue. So on the immigration side, the way that statute on smuggling is written, it's induce, encourage, abet, smuggle. So that the language is really broad as far as what you can commit to help somebody come to the United States illegally. So I'll give you here's my example of where this can get really extreme, because you've given some examples. So I have a guy that impregnates a girl in high school in Mexico, and they have the baby, but the parents, both sides' parents, aren't really keen with the relationship. It's kind of a mistake child, but he's taking responsibility for the child. It's on its birth certificate, name's on a birth certificate, but he ends up not staying with the mother, but sends her money, whatever else, and ends up coming to the United States. He eventually comes to me. He's married to a U.S. citizen. This is years later. The daughter's 8 or 9 years old. He goes through the process. He's at the point of getting his green card. He gets all his waivers done, everything else. He goes to the consulate in Juarez. They ask him, hey, you have a daughter in Mexico. Tell us about the daughter. Oh, well, she actually lives in the United States now. She's 16 years old. Okay, tell us about it. Well, I had her when I was in high school, I gave money to mom while I was in Mexico. I then moved to the United States, didn't hear from her for a while. She called me one day, hey, we're struggling down here. I sent some money her way. One day I get a notice from the courts here in Arizona saying I owe child support because the mother and daughter have arrived to the United States. They have now smuggled themselves, crossed themselves. They're illegally here, but they want child support. He said, no problem. I started paying. I've got a great relationship with my daughter. She's 17 years old. In the last 3 years, we've had a great relationship. Okay. Did you help them cross the border? No, I literally didn't have contact other than sending mom money for years. Mm-hmm. This was a child I didn't even have a relationship really with. So you sent her money? Well, yeah. Well, what did she use that money for?
See, I picked up on that right away.
I'm not sure. Groceries, diapers, whatever. I'm pretty sure she hired a coyote to use that money. She saved it, and you knew that, right? And he's like, no, I didn't know that. Officer wouldn't believe him, said they used the money to cross the border, even though And this guy was legit. Like, this isn't one that he was trying to create a story. This was, the facts were really
This was his story.
in his favor. And so basically they said, you're inadmissible. You've aided by sending money down, even though they couldn't prove where that money went, if it was used to hire a coyote. Mom didn't tell him how they came across. This was not somebody he had, it wasn't his wife. It was just a pregnancy he had in high school. So I ended up, he's here now, but it took me an extra 11 months to get him a waiver and do different things. He expected to be down there for 2 days in Juarez at the consulate and come back. He left his wife and 3 kids that he had now established here in the United States and had to stay and job and probably lost it. And it cost him almost a year outside the United States. So it's super broad. And the way they apply it, and I've had some other situations where, like, for example, I had one where they accused the mom of bringing her own daughter to the United States, but the daughter came with a visa, but they couldn't find the visa, even though mom had a visa and everybody else, which was logical that daughter had a visa because everybody else came with a visa, but they couldn't find it. So they said, you must have crossed her over illegally. And so she got the same penalty, 11 months, and had to wait outside the United States. And she was in her 60s. Grandkids and whatever else, and her husband was here. He's a U.S. citizen. Left.
And she probably didn't complain that much, even though that.
Oh, we tried like heck to find the visa, and that would have solved the problem. But we could never. The government never released those files to us on time, and so whatever. So yeah, the way that statute's written is super broad, and I'm assuming if I'm dealing with that on the immigration side, you're dealing with that on the federal side, as far as what they can use to prove whether you've smuggled or not. My other case that we were talking about just before we went on mic was the famous water cases that have now made a little bit of news, and my client, and luckily the criminal side of things, they dropped the charges, but basically she got a phone call from her friend saying, hey, I've heard my nephew's cousin or something like that unfortunately crossed the border and is dying in the desert. We can't pick him up because they knew better, but we need to get him some water. Like, he's out in the middle of nowhere. They're sending us coordinates. So she will you come with me? So she's the passenger. She's not even the driver. She gets in the car. Yeah, absolutely, I'll help. They fill up some water at a gas station. They drop it off. Border Patrol was on their binoculars watching them drop off the water. Never got in the car. They simply just dropped off the water and left. And that was aiding the smuggling, even though the people were already here.
Right.
And that's now a little bit of a sensitive situation as far as the criminal side. But on the immigration side, the judge still deported her. Said she was part of a smuggling ring. Didn't believe that. Well, it wasn't even that didn't believe. Just said, yeah, you helped aid and abet smuggling.
So what we want, because we have a cute staff today behind the camera, cuter than usual. The boys can hear that. They're like, you need to know this out there. This is our immigration system. This is where we're at. We have the hole in the bucket. We have a problem, Houston. We have a personal injury attorney that calls and goes, how in the Sam is this even remotely
a crime?
And this guy's going to go to 12 to 18 months, which to you and I, you just threw out 11 months, you threw out a year, you threw out to you and I, it's almost like the jaded effect is kind of cruised in. We still definitely feel for these folks, but we hear the time frame so often that we are a little bit on the callous side of things, and you're a little bit more human because you care about folks that get injured in car wrecks and folks that get jacked up. But then when you hear this kid's gonna spend 12 to 18 months with the Sam, blah blah blah, and we're like, yeah, okay, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like there is not. The statute definitely catches guys that are heavily involved in the cartel, that are part of these trafficking rings, that are picking up people on the daily. But the sad part is the cartel's also very aware of that fact that the government is cracking down. And so they're targeting, and you mentioned your 18-year-old kid.
Yep.
That's a very sensitive subject because right now they are targeting, and they are citizens, residents, illegal immigrants. They're going after high school kids to say, all we want you to do is go pick up some people. They're not explaining details, and they're going after these high school kids, number one, because of the ignorance of, I'm just going to make some money.
Right.
But I see it more and more. It's the younger kids that are going down, that are picking up. They heard from a buddy of a buddy, hey, you can make a quick $1,500 or the weekend. All you got to do is to
And
Tucson.
it's getting cheaper. Which is interesting
Yeah.
to me because, Beto made $2,500 on his haul for 3 dudes. And now I'm seeing like, $1,000, $1,200.
And it's because they're going after these younger kids.
Right.
They're not taking their chances with these guys that are going to be pattern guys of picking them up. So the statute serves its purpose for those. There are definitely smugglers out there, and maybe these 18-year-old kids should know better. But yeah, the statute's so broadly written that there's not a lot of leeway for it.
And so Mike's ultimate point, though, was why was it illegal? And so I'm going to answer on this side of things because there's your immigration answer. On this side of things, it's we go to trial and lose, and we have this big, huge problem with everybody's got a problem with the government on some level. And so you've got 12 jurors in a federal court, and these 12 jurors think the border's a disaster. It doesn't matter what color they are, what party affiliation they're in. They could be Republican, they could be Tea Party.
And your client's part of the problem, so let's fix it.
Right.
I'm going to do my part now.
Right. And so that is what we're presenting in front of, and they have this cell phone that we demonstrated earlier, not that particular cell phone, but which has, hey, they're going to make XYZ if they pick up this person here, and that's already in the United States. We're not asking them to go to the border. We're not asking them to go to Rocky Point and pick them up and then cross them. They're not in the hood.
And that's where it's hairy for me, because there's no actual smuggling. I mean, if you look at the actual physical definition of smuggling, you're talking about bringing them across
right. It's crossing
an
the
international border.
Now it's
which they're
aiding
not,
and abetting.
but now it's because
Right.
the induced or encouraged.
Induced, encouraged, aid, and abet. And that's all they got to prove. And then those 12 say guilty, even though they don't really want to see this nice young man or woman, hosed or behind the wall. They don't know they just did that. See, they don't know that part.
I'm just curious. So these governors that from Texas, Florida, wherever, that bus the immigrants up and send them off to Martha's Vineyard or whatever, are they
Complicit in the
Are
smuggling?
they complicit?
aiding, abetting?
Well, as Westover kind of went over first, and I do appreciate the detail because detail dudes, I'm in some real good company with detail dudes. So he's talking about those that are allowed or probationed in.
Yeah,
They're
paroled.
paroled in.
Yeah.
They're paroled in. Those are the ones on those buses.
Got it.
So that gives them the free pass to bus them on
It'd be
up.
interesting to see a couple of non-parole guys just hop
Yeah,
on
just
that
kinda
bus,
cruise
but I'm
on
sure
it.
it probably could happen. But
Oh,
because they're all at the churches and whatever else, I mean, a lot of these people are centralizing at some location, and I'm sure some people could probably
I'll
sneak
bet you
into
$1,
that.
you're right.
But
Well, the bottom line is it doesn't matter what affiliation party-wise you are on this one, on this particular issue. These governors of these 3 states that we're talking about right now that are bussing folks are worthless as tits on a lizard. So if you can imagine that, worthless. And I don't care if you bring up ours, who is obviously terrible. You've got Abbott that gets all sorts of praise, and I have no idea why. And the reality is nobody's really screaming the issue. Nobody's really saying, hey, if they're over the border, if the ball went over the fence, okay, the ball is over the fence. So they're now in the property of this, the ball is on this property now. Okay, that's where the ball is. So when we talked about my 12-year-old not being able to hop a fence. See, I'll rip on my 18-year-old and 12-year-old all in the same pod. It's going to be good. He can't hop a fence. It was so devastating. But I just sat there and watched him in a lawn chair until he did it. But anyway, when he dropped over on the other side, that's trespassing, right? Because those folks did not invite him over. Had he gone around and knocked on their door and said, hey, can I, and I'm sure he would have preferred this anyway, can I get in the backyard if my ball went over your fence? And 99.9% of all neighbors would have said, yeah, sure, right? Okay, that's legal entry. But him hopping the fence, which I find perfectly fine. But anyway, in this scenario, to grab the ball and get back over, him hopping the fence, that ball is actually theirs. It began ours, but is now theirs because it's on their property. Now you can go, and obviously we all know that the intricate, there's nothing intricate about this. The ball is no longer on your property. The ball is no longer your property until you go and retrieve it, put it back on your property. Now, how do you feel about that? Weird, because if you park in the wrong sidewalk or wrong driveway tonight, when you go home in your neighborhood, is your car still your car in somebody else's driveway or not?
Yeah, I can argue with you on
Yeah,
this all day.
I know, it's going to be fun. But our problem is to absolutely make, obviously the ball is Clint's ball. You know,
Yes.
That's his ball. It's just on their property. So, but he is trespassing to get his own ball, right? So that does fit our problem, our conundrum. So these undocumenteds that come over, they're our crossers, they're here now.
Subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
And now, literally Arizona, not federal, state, Arizona. And so whatever we, now that they're here, whatever we here as Arizonans do with them should be, I mean, these cases get charged stateside. These cases get charged federally. These cases get charged every which way but Sunday. They ruin lives. And this ball is over on our property. It's not federal property. It's Arizona property. Weird when we really back out on this. Let's frame out. Hold on. Kind of strange. So what should we do? Should Arizona law apply? Should Texas law apply when they're in Texas? Should California law apply? Not like there's any laws in California anyway. There's regulations, though. Are there any laws, Long Beach boy?
Another pod. Another time.
He's from Long Beach. He's straight out of Compton.
There you go.
It's awesome. It's awesome. But anyway, they have all sorts of regulations over there, but they don't have any laws. So,
They have laws.
like what?
If you have a plastic straw, you're probably doing prison time.
That's
How do
probably
you
true.
get so witty? That's good. That's a good one.
I'm just saying.
That's the one reason why I'm not going back is the straws. Or do I bring my own?
I'm just saying. You want to see no laws? You just wait.
Oh, just go check out
Drink
Canada.
From,
We're just...
drink from a plastic straw. Throw one in the ocean. Hurt a seagull.
All right.
It's all right.
So that ball goes
we're off.
over the fence. It is Arizona's ball until they knock on the door and say, "Hey, can I cruise over? Can I get my ball?" Okay, so who's knocking on the door for them? The feds are supposed to, or Mexico's where they began to come from. So they could be from South America. They could be from Central America. They could be from anywhere. But now what?
Wait, I got another one for you.
Go.
I mean, just an Uber driver, a Lyft driver
Yeah.
in Tucson, right? Okay, I'm just picking up a fare and I'm moving him. I'm getting paid. Do I have to check their ID to make sure that they're legal?
I'm going to leave that to you.
I honestly think if I was a smuggler, isn't that the way to go? Like, why wouldn't you just hire an Uber driver to go? Because I think that one, the knowledge part of it, you could probably easily defend saying I literally got it through the app
Yeah.
and went and picked up. I think it'd be hard to charge that. Dana would know better than me, but he decided to go to the bathroom. But I think if you and I were starting a cartel, maybe that's the way to go is Uber and taxi them and I don't know how many maybe there are a bunch that do it. Because I don't know how you would prosecute that. Because that's through an app as long as the knowledge, because like Dana said, they're pulling out their phones
Right.
and looking at the communication that's being done.
I mean, from the cartel's perspective, I get to save, close to $1,500 and pay 50 or whatever the fare is.
And I don't know if that's because where they're bringing him to is not somewhere that like drop houses and different things like that. They don't want an Uber driver to be knowing where that's at in case they're ever talked to or something like that. I don't know what the minutia would be of it, but yeah, it's a good thought. I kind of had the same thought when he was talking through his fact pattern, going, yeah, taxi him or at least taxi him to farther into the city.
Right.
So that the Border Patrol's not watching him.
Just
I don't know.
crazy.
You've referred to me a couple times, but I have a question.
Do it. You can.
Isn't the judicial system supposed to protect the individual and look at each case individually? That's justice, what it's there for. So these things can be broad, but isn't this case?
So Paige is asking if isn't that, our whole purpose of an American judicial system is if your knowledge or your mens rea wasn't true or wasn't knowingly in our statutes, right. Isn't that what it's supposed to decipher out? Is it supposed to weed out the ones that aren't truly intending to smuggle? And I can answer whatever I can answer is that yes, that's the nature of our system. The reality of the system is probably where you can kind of address is that going to try, the difference between pleading out something and going to trial is a huge difference as far as your potential consequences and sentencing goes. And so if there's any risk that they can prove up their case with a jury of your peers, your sentence may go from 1 to 5 years, correct?
So if I'm looking at this case and I find myself with this particular plea agreement that what you asked me about last week, 12 to 18 months, but I'm looking at 6 to 8 years if I am found guilty, and the policy isn't legal. Okay, it's a policy, it's a government policy that you deal with in immigration policies. They're not necessarily by the book
right.
type things or policies because they've got to cram as many people inside this one box as they can so that they can create what creates these policies? What creates the policies is the problems. And so what they're trying to do is there an example that we can lay down to where this isn't going to work? So we have dealt with this, you and I, together lots. And let's not get lost in the weeds. For example, once upon a time, if somebody had an endangerment DUI combo, that was doable. Now and then, no longer.
Ninth
doable.
Circuit came out and said no.
Right. So there was a policy. Ninth Circuit came out, made that no longer
precedent, basically.
Precedent, yeah. Right? Which changed policy within the DUI bureaus of the states that the Ninth Circuit covers. Okay. So the policy here is we don't want our 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 22-year-olds, we don't want them cruising, trafficking, or I hate to use the word trafficking, enabling these people to get from point A to point B within the state. All right? So we're going to slam down on them. 12 months sounds a lot to a non-criminal.
It does.
Right? 18 months sounds longer. Somewhere in between there sounds like a long time to a non-criminal. Mm-hmm. To a criminal, that sounds like, got off pretty light.
Good investment.
Good investment. This is very well put.
Yeah, and you see this a little bit on the criminal side, Paige, when you're dealing with a weed or drugs in a car and there's several passengers and guy in the backseat says, I didn't know this was in the car, it was not mine. And the policy of the state is to charge everybody in the car until somebody either cops to it and says, I own it, or everybody gets it. And so,
and the funny thing is,
and they're just trying to discourage
right.
the drugs or whatever it is. But
we get that. But here's the funny thing is they still charge each one of them, even though somebody fesses up.
Yeah, and you would know that even better than me.
Yeah, they still charge every one of them with constructive possession because it was there
within their reach.
What about people Beto and who have no history, like a criminal or a second offense? I can understand.
Sure.
But I don't understand why.
But that wouldn't fit the narrative. So the narrative is, and that wouldn't fit their policy because their policy is to punish, not to.
So just in case the mic didn't pick it up, what did she say?
Okay, yeah. So Paige is asking why, I can understand a second offense.
pattern of behaviors,
or pattern
criminal
of
history,
behavior, or a whole bucket ton of things on their cell phone, and so a lot of evidence. But one time going and picking up somebody that's already in the state of Arizona and taking them to another spot in the state of Arizona, why would that be illegal? Do I got that question right?
Yes, or who has a criminal background.
Yeah. And why would you can see somebody that has a background of not that squeaky clean, that's been trafficking over and over and over again, and they've been watched by law enforcement and documented in their investigation, and they've been part of a sting and so on and so forth, whatever. Okay. What's the difference? The difference is, frankly, you're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people like Jesse, not my Jesse, not my other Jesse. I named him after you.
Oh, excellent. Thanks.
I'd already met you.
We've got a good story about that.
Yeah. So my 18-year-old takes the $1,500, takes the money and runs, as the song says, and he has no criminal anything, but he's the person you want to send the message to. Okay.
That's not the judicial system.
Right. It's not, so Paige, our background singer, and she is awesome, is bringing up that's not what the system's designed to do. That is true. The system is designed to
treat each case individually.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what your point is. And you're right. And that's the part of the system that, while we have one of the best systems, I think, internationally, as far as our domestic policy goes on the judicial system, I think the way it was set up in the Founding Fathers is excellent, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that sometimes policy, and sometimes, like, whether it be the war on drugs in the 80s, and there was not any distinguishing of how you're, there's sentencings that go up the more criminal behavior you have, but that first time offense, if it's within the statute, it's charged the same as everyone else, because they were trying to discourage an entire epidemic of drugs at the time. And right now we'll call it an epidemic of immigration and illegal immigration. And so you're right, this probably wasn't prosecuted the same. The water person's probably not prosecuted 20 years ago. But because this is a policy issue, like Dana was explaining, certain AGs, certain prosecutors are going to make an example out of certain people, whether you've got a history of it or not. And you'd hope that there's a prosecutor that, when they get it, goes, okay, this is not my run-of-the-mill one. I'll give one guy a break, and hopefully, that may happen. Like I said, my girl on the water one didn't end up getting convicted. She got charged. She didn't end up. Somehow there was a dismissal of it. I don't know if she took classes or they just looked at the fact pattern and said, this isn't one that we're going to prosecute. But the problem is that consequence still got her deported because there was a police report, and that police report was reviewed by the immigration judge. In fact, he required, I didn't submit it, and he required, when he saw the arrest pop on her record, he required the police report, even though.
And deported her.
Based on that police report.
If they didn't have you guys to look at them individually, each case?
All right, so she's saying that lawyers might be worth it.
Some maybe.
Some.
Yeah, and we're appealing that case, and I think I win this one on appeal, by the way, my water case. I think when any other appellate court, I'm hoping the BIA looks at it and goes, because this judge is famous for being a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot crazy.
This Christmas time when I go to church, I'm lighting a candle for that client. We don't like candles, but I'm going to start.
Mrs. L, we'll call her.
Yes.
But because of the policy, they're scooping up the ignorant and the innocent, as well as the genuine wrongdoers.
Sure. You're getting tuna with your dolphins, right? Yeah, for sure.
You're getting tuna with your dolphins. Let's leave it at that, but let's open our eyes to what we're really facing here. Is the ball went over to our neighbor's yard. That's where our ball is, and we got to figure out what's the right way to figure this out. What's the legal way to do this? Do we have the horsepower? Well, we sure as hell spend a lot of money on a lot of other things not named immigration, not named border security, not named, but we have a few policies out there that have been remarkably awesome. 175K, how many do they give? 175,000 green cards a year? Or whatever.
Numbers before were 65,000 on certain categories.
Right, 65K in certain categories. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, at some point, let us go, we got a problem, Houston, and we need to fix it. And it doesn't matter if there's a D, an R, or whatever else, or you're just done with politics, which I think there's a lot of folks out there that could say that too, is they're just kind of done with the partisan politics and just, why can't we figure this out? I think with the Constitution, we can. And I think that each case has to absolutely be handled individually. The case you brought last week to my attention, just to kind of talk about, hits us in the gut a little bit. Cause like,
and it's interesting to hear, you know, you've got Paige in the background here that's shaking her head going as we're talking about this, and Mike's gets this question last week, and he's going, individually, this doesn't make sense. And you're right. I think the judicial system, if we were to want to put it in an ideal world, would be individually handled, right? And each individual fact pattern would be able to be developed. And in certain respects, that's true. But because this is so policy driven, because there's such a hotbed issue, the individuals end up getting wrapped up in entire problem, the hole in the bucket, and they're drowning with everybody else. And so it's interesting with immigration. I deal with this all the time, that people put immigration as a general topic, right? And just like everything else, there's individual stories and there's individual facts to each one. And it's like, oh, you know, we've talked about this before, but hey, immigrants are a drain on the healthcare system. And then I kind of walk them through what that would actually mean and why that could be solved, or why that isn't even true, or whatever else. And that's sometimes it's having those conversations that instead of just putting them in the generalized category of we have a problem, but individualizing them or breaking them down into why these are problems is eye-opening for people. I have these conversations all the time, and we've talked about this, I'm not super liberal when it comes to immigration policy, but I am super aware of how each individual it gets dealt with in the immigration system. And there are sad stories that people wouldn't believe that get caught up in it. And there are problems. There's no backing away from the immigration system is a problem. It's got all kinds of holes right now.
We have paper straws in California. We got problems. If this isn't pissing everybody off, if this immigration, because I haven't seen...
But it's hard. It's complex.
I haven't seen Jesse this worked up. Westover has been more assertive today. I need you more often here, because we have paper straws, we found out, in California now, and tuna and dolphins.
They're in the same net.
End up in the same net. And
those dolphins didn't do anything wrong.
Our legal system doesn't treat everybody individually, and some people get shafted, for lack of better, because of what you were just saying. Absolutely hosed because they didn't run out and hire somebody that has this very narrow skill set and a buddy across the street that can kind of walk him through how is this going to look on immigration because he just barely got his papers or whatever the case might be. This one I wouldn't have needed, Jesse, as much because Brian doesn't. This is a kid that's from here, that's staring down the barrel of like one of your sons or one of mine or one of yours. I mean, it's one of our kids that's staring down the barrel at federal prison time because he went and gave a ride to somebody that was already in the country, already in Arizona, to another spot in Arizona, and somebody offered him money to do that. And our legal system, both state and federal, that don't like to talk to each other very much,
treat him the same as somebody who smuggled 50,000 people.
Every other day.
It's tough, yeah.
Every other day as they're living. I mean, treating him the same. They're going to prison because they can't risk that jury thinking, yo. So we're talking to the jurors out there. So if this doesn't piss you off, like dolphins getting caught up in the nets and paper straws in California, dadgummit, let's start opening our eyes out there. We're done casting today.
Sounds good.